August and Lee and Elliot and William and Lewis and possibly Kaylee and Bert if you're listening on the other end. This is a continuation of the adventures of old Mr. Toad. And we are at Jimmy Skunk Consults His Friends, Chapter 2. Eleanor is with us this morning, and I read her the story, or I replayed the story for her yesterday, so she knows where we're at. So as long as my voice doesn't go away, because it's trying to for some reason, all of a sudden, let's start the story. Jimmy Skunk scratched his head thoughtfully as he watched old Mr. Toad go down the lone little path, hop, hop, hippity-hop, towards the Smiling Pool. He certainly was puzzled, was Jimmy Skunk. If old Mr. Toad had told him that he could fly, Jimmy would not have been more surprised, or found it harder to believe than that old Mr. Toad had a beautiful voice. The truth is, Jimmy didn't believe it. He thought that old Mr. Toad was trying to fool him. Presently, Peter Rabbit came along. He found Jimmy Skunk sitting in a brown study. He had quite forgotten to look for fat beetles, and when he forgets to do that, you may make up your mind that Jimmy is doing some hard thinking. Hello, old striped coat. What have you got on your mind this fine morning? Cried Peter Rabbit. Said Jimmy, simply pointing down the lone little path. Peter looked. Do you mean old Mr. Toad? He asked. Jimmy nodded. Do you see anything queer about him? He asked in his turn. Peter stared down the lone little path. No, he replied, except that he seems in a great hurry. That's just it, Jimmy returned promptly. Did you ever see him hurry unless he was frightened? Peter confessed that he had never had. Well, he isn't frightening now, yet just look at him go, retorted Jimmy. Says he's got a beautiful voice, and that he has to take part in a spring course at the Smiling Pool, and that he is late. Peter looked very hard at Jimmy to see if he was fooling or telling the truth. Then he began to laugh. Old Mr. Toad sing? The very idea, he cried. He can sing about as much as I can, and that is not at all. Jimmy grinned. I think he's crazy, if you ask me, said he, and yet he was just as earnest about it as if it were really so. I think he must have eaten something that has gone to his head. There's Uncle Billy Possum over there. Let's ask him what he thinks. So Jimmy and Peter joined Uncle Billy, and Jimmy told the story about old Mr. Toad all over again. Uncle Billy chuckled and laughed just as they had at the idea of old Mr. Toad saying his beautiful voice. But Uncle Billy had a shrewd little head on his shoulders, and after a few minutes he stopped laughing. I don't reckon learning a right smart long time ago that I don't know all there is to know about my neighbors, said he. We uns done think of Briar Toad as ugly looking for sure, long that we uns may have overlooked something. I don't reckon Briar Toad can sing, but I lows that perhaps he thinks he can. What do y'all say we uns going down to Smiling Pool and finding out what he really is up to? The very thing, cried Peter, kicking up his heels. You know, Peter is always ready to go anywhere or do anything that will satisfy his curiosity. Jimmy Skunk thought it over for a few minutes. Bless you, Ella. And then he decided that as he hadn't anything in particular to do, and as he might find some fat beetles on the way, he would go off too. So off they started after old Mr. Toad, Peter Rabbit in the lead as usual, Uncle Billy Possum next grinning as only he can grin, and in the rear Jimmy Skunk taking his time and keeping a sharp eye out for fat beetles. That was Chapter 3 of The Adventures of Old Mr. Toad. And we will be back to read to you Thursday, because it will not happen tomorrow morning. Can you guys say goodbye?
Goodbye. 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 Goodbye.